just want to say to start, so we don't get in any trouble, you don't actually have permission to do those things, so no one's confused. Except for maybe the canned food display. If you do that, call me, because I would really like to come. So, hey, we are thrilled that you are here this morning, and I feel a little high maintenance with all the stuff that we have up here, but I'm excited about this morning, and I hope it goes well, and I'm going to figure this guy out. Maybe. Nope. I did it. That was not fake excitement. That was legitimate excitement. So this is how I'd like to start our discussion this morning. So I was taught in two different schools of thought as to how I should understand the creation of the world. I was taught in public school that there was the Big Bang Theory, which had this central idea that at one point in time, there was a swirling ball of mass and energy and light and all these other things in existence. And all of a sudden, at this one specific moment, this swirling ball of mass and energy exploded. And then over millions and millions of years, life evolved and transformed and changed into where we are today. That's what I was taught in public school. In Sunday school, I was taught that there is a creator God who on 6 days created everything that has ever been in existence, and that's how life was. And so it was kind of, this was actually pretty tense for me because I was taught that the Bible was true, but I was also taught that I should respect my teacher. And should I put on my science exam, how did the world come into being, Jesus, I would not have gotten a good grade. And so I didn't really know how to navigate this. And then this is how it was finally explained to me. It was just a matter of, you know what, there's some people that believe that, that's fine, but we take our belief on faith. And so that's what we need to have. We just need to have faith that the world came around how God said it would, regardless of fossil evidence or any other things. We just need to have faith. Now, I'm not going to get into all the dynamics of this entire thing today, but I just want to say, I think that understanding is a little too simplistic at best. And so there's been this question, specifically in relation to the Big Bang Theory, that has bothered me for years. And it's this question: where did the swirling ball of mass and energy come from? There is a swirling ball of mass and energy that one day exploded, and then millions and millions of years later, we're here where we are today. But this is my question: where did that come from? Like, what was before that? So if I'm at my house and my house is clean and I go out and I walk the dog and I come back in my house and my family room is now filled with toys, and I look at my children and I say, where did these toys come from? They don't just say, it always was. Like, I don't take that as an acceptable response for where did this come from. And I realized that we have this scientific explanation of where the world came from that has this massive gap that is just built on faith. And I think that is true for a lot of how we live our lives and a lot of what we believe, that there are these huge gaps in our beliefs and in our thoughts that we don't really talk about and we're not really taught to question. So this is what we're doing in this series, Permission Granted, is we are saying you have permission to ask questions that you may have previously thought were off limits. You have permission to think thoughts that you previously thought were out of bounds. You have permission that sometimes people say, well, we don't believe that, we don't think that, we don't talk about that. We're saying, let's have the conversation. Let's actually go through it, and we want to give you permission to have these discussions and to think thoughts, not because they're necessarily true, but because we believe that this is how faith grows. Now, I want to show you one of my favorite authors, a guy by the name of Dallas Willard. He has this spectrum for how he explains how faith grows. And he says it like this: we have two actions that we can take. We can doubt and we can believe. And we have two things that we can do in terms of those actions. We can doubt, we have doubts, and we also have beliefs. He says this is what we're typically taught to do, is in church, especially when we're younger, people say this: you just simply need to believe your beliefs. And kind of one of the statement that comes from there is the Bible said it, I believe it, end of story. Bible said it, I believe it, I just need to believe my beliefs, I need to not think about anything else. Now, there's a pivotal stage of life that most of us go through in which we're kind of deconstructing the childhood faith that we grew up with. And so like the things that we were taught to just take on faith, all of a sudden we have questions. And as we go through that, we have two key actions. What we begin doing is we begin doubting our beliefs and we begin believing our doubts. And the assumption that we all internally make is we go, this is more mature thought. This is higher level thinking. But Dallas Willard says, no, if you're actually going to be like, have intellectual integrity, you need to run it the whole way through the spectrum. It's not enough just to doubt your beliefs and believe your doubts. You must also doubt your doubts and believe your beliefs. Make sense? Confusing enough? We went the whole way through? There we go. So this is what we're going to do in this series, is we're actually going to go through this process. The series is going to be 5 weeks long. And for the first 4 weeks of the series, we're just going to go through the spectrum, because I think at each stage of this, with each action that we take, something pivotal is gained in how we understand faith. So today, this is where we're going to start. We're going to start with the action of doubting our doubts. Now, I need to be really honest and upfront here. Today, what we're going to do is, and what I'm going to talk about, is going to be just a pathetic sermon, okay? And that's not a like life mantra, set your goals low, you'll always overachieve, okay? That's not just what I'm saying. So the reason why this is gonna be a pathetic sermon is it really, in my head, it doesn't qualify as a sermon at all. Because I want to talk about this idea of doubting our doubts. And in order to do that, we need to look at faith from a position outside of faith. And I can't say, hey, this is why we should doubt our doubts from the Bible, because then we're using belief as the foundation. So I want to take what would kind of be construed as a rational, logical approach to why we should doubt our doubts. Now, if this helps you, if you're really nervous about, oh my goodness, where is this going? When we prep out series, I kind of design a series as a series is just one big long message. So this series is 5 weeks long, and for me, it's prepped out as a 4-hour long message. Now, I'm not gonna invite you to come listen to a 4-hour long message. So we spread it out over weeks, because there's no way you could listen to me for 4 hours. This is what my wife tells me over and over again. So I'm very confident that it's true. Okay, so today, this is simply the introduction to everything else that we're gonna talk about. And if you're like, we need to have scripture, I have 2 verses at the end, okay? I put them on there just to make that, but over the next couple weeks, we are gonna get really heavy and deep into scripture. So this is introduction to permission granted, and we're gonna talk about doubting our doubts. And here's the thing, in terms of what's gonna take place. I am in no way today going to attempt to prove that God exists. That is not in any way my goal. And in fact, I don't believe that's possible. I really don't. I don't believe it's possible to prove that God exists. This is why so much of Scripture talks about faith and trust. And one of my favorite authors, C.S. Lewis, he says it like this. He says, when the author walks on the stage, the play is over. When the author walks on the stage, the play is over. He says, when Jesus shows up finally and returns, and it's obvious to everyone that he is Lord, he says, that's when it's over. Like that's when it's done. We have no room to make decision as to whether or follow or not there. And so I'm not attempting to prove that God exists by any means. But this is what I'm hoping to do, is I hope to create space for belief in your head. Now, I understand we're at church, and most of you are, I would say many of you are, I believe, I'm good. I don't have struggles. I don't have doubts. I think you may need to look at your faith closer, and I think you may need to be more honest, brutally honest with yourself of your questions. But you may be in the spot where you just go, I feel like my faith is perfectly solid, and I just want to applaud you. And maybe, if anything, this will give you a different perspective as to why your faith matters. But my guess is that there's many people who aren't quite so solid. And I had a close friend. He was 92 years old, and we had breakfast every month. This man had followed Christ his entire life, and then I think it was about 87, he abandoned his faith. That he thought that the things that he had learned in science no longer were congruent with a faith that believed in God. And so we would have breakfast every month, and he would talk about faith as something that he missed. He said he missed belief. He missed having faith. And I tried to explain to him that what he wasn't missing was the idea of belief. He was actually missing his relationship with God, that he longed for that again. But what I noticed is we talked over and over again, that if someone had taken the time to clear an intellectual path for him in order to believe, then maybe his faith would have been very different. There's a famous story that Walter Isaacson tells, that there was a young boy who was in a Catholic church one day, and he walked up to the priest at the end of service and he asked a question. He said, "Does God know how many fingers I'm going to hold up before I do it?" And the priest said, "Yes, God does know how many fingers you're going to hold up before you do it." And he had behind his back a cover of Time magazine that had people who were starving in Africa. And he says, "Well, then does God know this? And what's he doing about it?" And the priest gave a very simple answer: "We just need to trust him." And that was the day that young boy walked away from faith. The name of that boy is Steve Jobs. And I've often wondered, how would the world be different today if instead of giving a very simplistic answer, if he had actually entered into a conversation and said, "Hey, let's talk about this." And we may not know every answer. We might not know every question that we need to ask, but let's at least have a conversation about what this looks like. And so if anything, that is my hope of what we're going to do, especially today, but throughout this entire series, is that maybe this will confirm your belief. Maybe this will ask some questions that we haven't asked before. But if anything, I hope to create some space to believe in your own heart and in your own soul. And so this is where I'd like to start today. I'm not going to start, we talk scientifically. I don't think that's the main reason why people believe is scientifically. I think it's far more common than that. And we actually see this first idea in the lyrics of John Lennon, who writes this: "Imagine there's no countries, it isn't hard to do, nothing to kill or die for," in key phrase, "and no religion too. Imagine all the people living life in peace." He says, "You may say I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one. I hope someday you'll join us and the world will be as one." And so he has this idea, very, very simply stated, that if the world would be a better place if there was no religion. If faith and belief were something that were true of yesterday's generations, but not true of today's generations, then the world would indeed be a better place. Now, this argument is not a difficult argument to make. You look at world history, and all of a sudden, Christianity, not just religion, Christianity itself has to answer for some of our own crimes. The Crusades, we're accountable for that. The Spanish Inquisition, we're accountable for that. The Salem witch trials in our own country. Like, we have to answer for some of these things. And it's really easy for it to be built up and go, well, the Christians did that. The Christians did that. They say they're good, but they've done all these terrible things. We see in our recent history in our country, we see during the Civil War, there were Christians who defended slavery from Scripture, that's what they did. Now, I'd like to pause right there, and I would say, if you're going to say Christians are accountable for all this, which we are, you must also look at the other things the Christians have done in the world that are good. While there were Christians who defended slavery from a Christian perspective, the majority of people who were abolitionists did it because of their faith. We look also, the reason why we have hospitals today is because when the plague was rampant, Christians ran into the cities that were suffering when everyone else was running away, and they started mercy houses within these cities, which was the start of our hospitals today. The reason why we have libraries today is because Christians believed that information was significant and should be kept to pass down to future generations. The reason why we have science today is because Christians had a different view of the world. Most of the people in the world today had a cyclical view of the world. They believed we're going to encounter the same problems over and over again. Christians viewed the world different. They believe that we serve a creator God who wants to be known. And so we can discover the meaning behind creation and how creation is made up. And in so doing, we'll know God better and we'll know our world better. And so I just want to say, to simply say, the world would be better if there was no religion, look at the bad things that Christians have done. You must also look at the good, okay? But that's still a point that we need to look at. The world would be a better place if there was no religion. And so what we see is, by any standard, the 21st century was the least religious and the least Christian century that we have probably since the time of Jesus. The 21st century was the least religious century that we have seen since BC times. And it's commonly thought of, people say, as Christianity has been removed from its central place in conversation and civic life, that the world has gotten better. I love that this argument is kind of embodied by a guy by the name of Steven Pinker, who says it like this. He kind of lists off all the things that we've left behind. He says, cruelty is entertainment, human sacrifice to indulge superstition, slavery as a labor-saving device, conquest as the mission statement of government, genocide as a means of acquiring real estate, torture and mutilation as routine punishment, the death penalty for misdemeanors and differences of opinion, assassination as the mechanism of political succession, homicide as the major form of conflict resolution, all were unexceptionable features of life for most of human history. But today, they are rare to non-existent in the West, far less common elsewhere than they used to be, concealed when they do occur, and widely condemned when they are brought to light. He says this, as we've removed faith from its central place, he says, we've evolved. We're not so barbaric as we used to be. Life has gotten better. And so there was an author, an atheist author, his name is David Berlinski, and so he took Steven Pinker to task, and he said, I don't believe in God, but I think your assessment that the world in the 21st century is better because faith has been removed, he says, I think that's actually incorrect. And so he put together this number, 190,485,000. Now, that's not a total, no, what that number came from was from all these smaller numbers. Now, what all these smaller numbers represent is the different conflicts that happened just during the 21st century. He said, that's fine. That's fine if you want to say the 21st century, that we've evolved, that we're better, that we're further along as a species because religion is so dominant, and the 21st century was the best century in human history. He says, but here's the thing you have to remember is as religion has been removed in the 21st century, 190,485,000 people were murdered. Murdered all over the world. He says, are we really getting better? It was the bloodiest century in human history. The bloodiest century in human history. Now, he doesn't say this obviously is why you should believe in God, because he's an atheist. But he's saying we need to really, really hold back the reins on this idea that the world is just getting better and better and better as faith is being removed, because he says that's not what I see. And David Berlinski ends up saying this. He says, what makes men good? Nothing. That is the answer of historical experience and a troubled common sense. He says, without faith, without belief, what makes men good? He says, nothing. We have our history books to verify that, and anyone who takes a look around them could confirm that is true. Now, that's a little different view for an atheist to take. Probably the more common view that we see atheism holding is this view from Richard Dawkins, who says religion poisons everything. As belief makes its way into all these different spheres of society, it makes them worse. But I just want to pause on that real quick. So this idea that religion poisons everything, and if we remove Christianity, then all of a sudden people become better, this is an odd view. Now, remember, this worldview has evolution as its central tenet, as its central belief for how the world came about. One of the key ideas within evolution is survival of the fittest. Now, we need to understand survival of the fittest is fundamentally at odds with the idea that we should serve the poor. They don't interact, okay? They're not congruent. The idea that only the fittest survive and the strong should eat the weak is fundamentally opposed to the idea that we should be kind and gracious and generous to one another. The philosopher, Vladimir, I don't know how to say his last name, said it like this: man descended from apes, therefore we should love one another. Isn't that awesome? This is the viewpoint. Man descended from apes, therefore we should love one another. Friedrich Nietzsche, the famous atheist philosopher, in a letter to George Eliot, who was a novelist at the time, he says this. He says, this is what's going to happen in the West. This is the part of the world that we live in. He says, this is what's going to happen, is they're going to attempt to remove God from the public sphere, yet hang on to morality. And he said they will not be able to do so. Now, he wanted God to be removed from the public sphere, but he said, if God goes out of the public sphere in common conversation, morality will as well, because these are linked together. We have actually seen Nietzsche's prophecy come true in our recent history. In 1966, Time magazine published this famous cover, Is God Dead? So no one cares about God anymore. Is God dead? Because we don't care. What, 3 weeks ago? 3 weeks ago. They published this cover. Is truth dead? We should see this idea that truth is dead as the inevitable conclusion to the thought that God is dead. Now, I think this is massive because what we see, this fundamental idea the world would be better if there was no religion, takes some massive hits, not just from Christianity, but from within atheism itself. And my favorite thinker on this is a guy by the name of Viktor Frankl. Just out of curiosity, has anyone read Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl? There you go, a few. You would be excited. If I could recommend any book to you, I would recommend Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. Viktor Frankl is a psychoanalyst who survives the concentration camps of the Holocaust. And so he was someone who deeply understands the human psyche and goes through the most horrific horrors that anyone could possibly imagine. One of my favorite things that he writes in the book, this has nothing to do with the sermon, but I just want to share this. One of my favorite things that he writes is he says, the last of all human freedoms, the last thing that anyone can take from you is the ability to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances. And he realizes this, that he is going through the most horrific things that anyone could possibly imagine. He realizes, I still get to choose how I respond. I still get to choose my attitude within this. And no matter what they take from me, they cannot take that. So after World War II was over and Viktor Frankl is released from the Holocaust, he begins teaching on the importance of belief. Because what he experienced a society that either used God for its own gain and then removed God as much as they could from the discussion. And so he begins teaching on the importance of belief. And this is what he taught. I'm going to make a drawing. I'm bad at drawing. My handwriting is illegible. I'm not yelling at you. I just write a little bit better in all caps, okay? But my drawing is even worse. So this is going to be a plane. And I need to identify that ahead of time. Otherwise, you'll have no idea that that's a plane. That a good? Cool. Well, that's the window and the tail. And that's a person who's not allowed to fly. And we'll write United right there. Never happened. So this is what Viktor Frankl says. He says, if a plane is attempting to, this is not to scale, okay? If a plane is attempting to go here and flies directly for this target, what will happen is the plane will fail and they'll end up here. He says, this is why. Because there will be crosswinds that'll cause the plane to go lower than its intended target. What the plane must actually do is it must shoot for somewhere north of that intended target, and then it will actually achieve its intended destination. This is the correlation he makes. He says, man works the exact same way. When we set as our target to be good men, what will inevitably happen is crosswinds will come. Disease, illness, discouragement, people who get sick, bosses who don't like you, children who you don't like. You run down the list. He says, what will happen is you will face crosswinds in life and you will become less than human. He says, this is how men become monsters, is we set as our intended target to be good and we become far less than human. He says, what humanity needs at the core is we need something that elevates our sights, that raises our desires on who we seek to become and what we think is possible. And he says, and when we elevate our sights, what we find is we're actually able to become fully men. We're actually able to become the men and women who we were created to be. And he says, this is why we need belief. He doesn't even get into this is why belief is true. He says, humanity at the core, after experiencing the horrors of the Holocaust, says humanity needs belief in order to become men and to resist becoming monsters. Isn't that amazing? So that is why the world would not be a better place if there was no religion, which is, I think, one of the most common ideas as we talk about it all the time. The world would be a better place if there was no religion. Viktor Frankl, who experiences the Holocaust, says, no, that is absolutely not the case. Now, again, I don't think that's probably the main reason why people reject faith. It's usually far more personal than that. We say it like this: my life would be better if there was no religion. Forget the world as a whole, my life would be better if there was no religion. And the basic idea behind this that people pursue is this idea of freedom. The problem with faith, the problem with Christianity is all of a sudden there are rules, there are boundaries, there are guidelines. And I can't be happy unless if I'm able to do what I want, able to be what I want, able to pursue whatever I feel like is within inside of me to pursue. That as long as there are restrictions, as long as there are boundaries, then I'm not able to be happy. Now, I'll give you an example of this in a second. First, I want to give you an example from culture. We see this all over culture in all these different sorts of places, but I think one of the most stunning examples comes in a children's movie. Now, I want to set this up carefully, okay? I don't think this children's movie at its core is attempting to evangelize a secular humanist philosophy, okay? I don't think that's what they're doing. I don't think they're saying, let's have this entertainment and let's deposit this little idea in the child's minds and then they'll think like this later on. I think their goal is to make money, okay? I think that's all it is. But I've actually seen this in the movie Frozen, which I have now seen and heard in the back of my van hundreds and hundreds of times. So I am very, very familiar with this movie. Now, again, I'm not saying, I don't think Disney is saying, hey, let's make them think this. I think Disney's trying to make money, okay? And what we see within this is a reflection of the views of our culture. Now, to set you up just a little bit, I don't want to give the whole plot away. Who's seen the movie Frozen? Has anyone? Okay, good. Well, for those of you who haven't, just to catch you up briefly, the movie Frozen revolves around these two girls, Anna and Elsa. Elsa has magical powers. Anna does not. They're very close. One day they're playing. Elsa freezes Anna's head accidentally. They take him to the mysterious trolls. The trolls heal Anna, but say the worst thing is if she freezes her heart. So they erase Anna's memory, they take away the memories, but they leave the love. Anna and Elsa's parents then are shipwrecked and completely disappear, and Elsa is going to become queen. Now, Anna just wants to hang out with Elsa as she isolates herself. She wants to go build a snowman or maybe ride a bike up and down the hall. And so as Elsa's going to her coronation, Anna meets Prince Hans of the Southern Isles, who she falls in love with and wants to marry that day. But Elsa won't let her marry because they've only met for a day, and so that's not possible. In this stirring exchange at the coronation, Anna removes Elsa's glove, which was helping to conceal her powers. Elsa reveals that she's actually an ice princess with magical powers. Everyone condemns her because she sets off an eternal winter in Arendelle. She flees to the mountains to isolate herself. Anna runs up to chase her down. Elsa accidentally freezes Anna's heart, even though she sends a snow monster to send them out of kindness, not jealousy. They take her to the trolls. They realize she needs true love in order to remove that. They take her to Prince Hans, who ends up being a villain and was only in it for the gain because she wasn't getting in front of his 7 brothers in order to be the next king. In this stirring moment, Elsa gets captured. She's on the lake. There's this incredible blizzard going around. The lake is frozen. Prince Hans is going to kill Elsa. Anna runs up, saves him, puts her hand up, becomes a nice princess. You think she's done, but you realize it was true love that saved her. She didn't need no man the entire time. She had love all by herself. So, thank you. Like I said, hundreds and hundreds of times I've seen that movie. So, the pivotal moment, the key part of the whole movie is this song, Let It Go, which I'm guessing you have probably heard sometime before. Now, I want to show you the lyrics to this song, Let It Go, because we sing as an innocent song. My girls have sung it hundreds and hundreds of times, and I realized there was a part of the song that's very problematic for me. Now, this does not mean I'm boycotting Frozen, okay? I'm not doing that in my house, but I want to show you what it says. No right, no wrong, no rules for me. I'm free. Now that's a pretty pivotal statement right there. No right, no wrong, no rules for me. I'm free. This is the central belief of our culture today. If I do not have restrictions, if I do not have guidelines, boundaries, or rules, then I will experience freedom. Then I will experience happiness. Let me give you a very simple scenario that hopefully will put this to bed somewhat. Let's say you're a grandpa. Some of you are a grandpa, okay? Let's say you're a grandpa and you love your grandchildren, and you also love fried food. I'm not saying you love them equally, okay? You love the grandkids more, but you would say, I love both. One day you're having chest pains. You go into your doctor and your doctor says, listen, you have heart problems. You need to give up fried foods immediately. What does this say? You can no longer be happy. That's what it says. It says, because you have restrictions, because you have boundaries, because you have guidelines, and you can no longer pursue the desires within you, sorry, you can no longer be happy in this life. Now, is that what actually happens? No, you give up fried foods because you go, I love my grandkids more. Some of you, this is my encouragement to you because you had a doctor's meeting somewhere along the way and you really remember how much you like fried food. No, you love your grandkids more. Like, stick with your grandkids. Give up the fried foods. You love your grandkids more because this is what we see. Freedom is not found with no restrictions. Freedom and happiness are found in embracing the right restrictions. I don't know much about cars, okay? I'm not good at cars. I can put the gas in. That's about it. I thought I had like 2 or 3 more things, but I can tell when a tire's flat, like when it's flat, and I'm like, that tire's flat. I need to call somebody, okay? So I don't know much about cars. I know I need to take it to get the oil changed from time to time, that this is an important thing, to get the oil in my car changed. Now, let's say I drive, I don't know how many miles it takes, some of you mechanic, just humor me. Let's say I drive 80,000 miles without any oil in my car. Now, I know some of you are going, that's not possible. I don't know, just humor me. Let's say I drive 80,000 miles with no oil in my car, and then the engine in my car catches on fire and blows up. What do? Do I blame the car? Are you kidding me? Why would you do that? No, I understand that these are the restrictions in order for my vehicle to run well. These are the guidelines I have to adopt in order for it to function properly. And we don't understand this about humanity for some reason. We don't understand the fact that we have been created and there are guidelines, there are restrictions within which our lives are best lived. And we're stuck with this philosophy that you need to throw off every restraint and every guideline and every rule in order to be free, in order to be happy. And what we see that is absolutely not the case in any way. So my life would be better if there was no religion. That's not true. But there's still this pervading belief that somehow faith is kind of juvenile. This kind of, when I was a kid, I believed in Santa Claus. I believed in the Tooth Fairy. I believed in the Easter Bunny. I believed in the elf on the shelf. That guy's creepy, okay? Just want to put that out there. I believed in all these other things, and I believed in God. Now, I've put away Santa Claus and Tooth Fairy, Easter Bunny, and thank goodness I've put away the elf on the shelf. But shouldn't I release God too? Isn't that just a juvenile belief that it's more mature to put God away and to just live my life rationally and logically? And I think somehow we've misconstrued the idea of what a more mature thought is. I love this quote by Mark Lilla, the philosopher. He says this, "To most humans, curiosity about higher things comes naturally. It's indifference to them that must be learned." It comes naturally. It's indifference that must be learned. So for every kid that we've had, I always have the youngest one sits behind me in the van. So I'm driving, they're just right behind me. And normally there's this phase, like a year to 18 months to about 2 years, All my kids have done the exact same thing. I'll get them out of the van and we'll turn around and we'll walk outside when we get home at night. And every single one of them wants to look for the moon. It's like, where's the moon? Where's the moon? Where's the moon? A couple years ago with Emmy, who's now 4, it was the time that there was a super moon. And so showing, look at that. It's a super moon. Super moon. I don't know if she thought I was going to wear a cape or something like that. It's a super moon. When the moon isn't out there, they always say, the moon's hiding. The moon's hiding. Like, yeah, it is. Now, this is how every single time it's gone with my children, is I'll get them out of the van, and they want to look for the moon. And I want to go watch the NBA playoffs. Because I've seen the moon, okay? I know the moon's there. Just pause right there. Who has the more mature view? It's not me. It's not me. My kids are amazed that there is a mass of land in the sky that glows. They're amazed by that. I should be too. And I'm not. I'm not. In my view, is not the more mature one. Sometimes we lose awe and wonder, not because we're mature, but because we're calloused. And we fail to distinguish between the two. I want to read to you my favorite quote, and this is just so amazing to me, these words. This is by G.K. Chesterton in his book, Orthodoxy. And he writes, well, I'm just going to say it to you, because this is one of those things I said, I need to know this. I need to remember this, because my tendency is always to be calloused, and I always wanted this to be on my mind. He says this, a child kicks his legs rhythmically through excess, not absence of life. Because children have abounding vitality, because they are in spirit fierce and free, they want things repeated and unchanged. And so they say, do it again. And the adult does it again and again until he is nearly dead, because adults do not have the strength to exult in monotony. But perhaps God does have the strength to exult in monotony. It is possible that God says every morning, do it again to the sun, and every evening, do it again to the moon. It may not be automatic necessity that makes all daisies alike. It may be that God makes each daisy separately and yet has never grown tired of making them. For we have sinned and grown old, and our Father is younger than we. Isn't that amazing? Like, isn't that absolutely incredible? This idea that my cynicism is not what I was wired with, that somewhere through the struggles and troubles of life, I have adopted it when it was never supposed to be in there, that I was created to exist in awe and wonder, and I have simply grown tired and old of the things that still should amaze me. That blows me away over and over again. And we get this idea that somehow, if we're smart, then God pushes behind. That's the more mature view, and I don't think that's the case. So today, did I prove God? No, not even close. C.S. Lewis, when the author walks on the stage, the play is over. My hope today is that I have shown you some evidence for belief and some ideas behind why believing God is significant and important. And there's this quote by Miroslav Volf that I love. He says this, attachment to God amplifies and deepens enjoyment of the world, which is an idea that we see echoed in Ecclesiastes chapter 2. Solomon, wisest man who ever lives, writes this, a person can do nothing better than to eat and drink and find satisfaction in their own toil. This too, I see, is from the hand of God. For without him, who can eat or find enjoyment? So, here's my hope. Today, I don't think if you come in as a skeptic, I don't think if you came in deeply questioning your faith, I don't think if you just came in because someone asked you or your spouse drugged you or your kids demanded that you go and you didn't want to look like a heathen to them, I don't think I've made the case that you should absolutely believe in Jesus, okay? We'll get to that next week. Here's my hope, is I want you to at least see the necessity for belief in the world that we live in. How massively important the idea itself of belief is, in a world that wants to throw off all restraint and completely reject God, as a juvenile and simplistic view, and that is absolutely not the case. Viktor Frankl, who walked through the worst horrors of humanity, says man needs belief in order to simply be man. And my hope is today that you'll understand that in some way we have cleared an intellectual path for you, that should you seek to pursue Jesus, that you can do exactly that. So, would you stand for the benediction? May you, as you go, question things that were previously unquestioned. May you be more focused on asking the right questions than simply making the right statements. And may you understand that there is no thought, no idea, no question that is too big for our God to handle. And so may you pursue your faith with the honesty and authenticity that I believe our God demands. Go in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. You are dismissed.